You're right.
Ton of action on it.
This doesn't go off.
Even one citizen.
Me too, on my side.
Meeting to order. Karen, if you could do roll call, please?
Woburn, absent. Jim Callahan, absent. Karen Woburn,
Yeah.
Edmonds,
Here,
Rob Klein,
Here,
Bob Dougherty.
Here. Before the meeting begins, please silence your cell phones and note that this meeting is being recorded. We have no ANRs, as I can see, or anything. So we're right to public hearings. And the first one is a zoning amendment. Section 11.3, procedures for special permits. This petition aims to revise section 11.3 to include that special permit petitions be sent to the building commissioner for review and comment, as well as clarification on the number of copies required. We don't have anybody here. John, please?
So, I was recommending for this public hearing, since there are no proponents or opponents to it in the audience, for the board, after consideration, send a favorable recommendation to the city council on this particular zoning amendment as written.
motion to close the public hearing.
second.
Motion by Dave, second by Rob to close the public hearing. All those in favor? 4-0 carries.
Motion to accept the executive director's recommendation.
Motion by Dave to accept the director's recommendation. Second by Kevin. All those in favor? 4-0 carries. Okay. Second public hearing. Zoning amendment, section 7.3, and section 7.4. Procedures for special permits, sections 7.3 and 7.4. Again, yes, we do have somebody here. Excellent.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Ryan Douglas. I'm an attorney at Rubin and Rudman, 500 Unicorn Park Drive, Woburn, filling in tonight for Joseph Tarby. So I'm here tonight on behalf of CB Silva LLC, the owners of 4345 Church Street. We're here to ask for your recommendations on a petition to amend sections 7.3 and 7.4 of the ordinance. I'll explain what the amendment does in just a minute, but if you'll allow me, I think it's important that I talk about sort of the history and how we got here and why we're asking for this amendment. So if you could just bear with me for a minute. So back in 2017, this property was owned by a company called WM Homes LLC. And at the time, they applied for a special permit to tear down the existing building and put up a new 3-family structure. The neighbors and the city did not like that idea. It would have created more density. But what they did do is they said that a 2-family would be appropriate, just not a 3-family. So the application was denied and the project was dropped. A few years later, in 2020, WM Homes came back with the new approach and said, look, you know, we understand that you don't want a 3-family development here. How about a 2-family development, which is what you suggested back in 2017. The board was in agreement that that would be an okay way to proceed, so they granted a permit. However, the work was actually never completed under that permit. And that really takes us to 2024, this last year. My client, Mr. De Silva, was actually one of the contractors, or the contractor, working on the project that was never completed back in 2020. So when things fell apart, he was left holding the bag, so to speak, and was owed about $350,000 for the work that he did. And rather than fight it out in court, he basically came to a deal with WM Homes and said, look, you know, if you convey to me the property, then we can call it a wash. And that's exactly what happened. So he took ownership of the property in exchange for what he was owed. Now, Mr. De Silva, assuming that the property still had non-conforming status, attempted to resume work, this renovation work, which you have the pictures, I believe, in the packet in front of you to see what he did up in 2020 before he discontinued and before that project stopped. So last year he approached the building department to pull a permit to complete the 2-family. And it was at this point that the city requested proof that the structure was legally non-conforming, that it was a legally non-conforming use. So in September of last year, that's when our firm got involved. Mr. De Silva retained Joseph Tarby at Woburn and Rudman, and it was ultimately determined that under section 7.4 of the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, the legal non-conforming status had lapsed. The 2-year period had gone by. So just on that note, and I'll say it here, you know, Mr. De Silva is not a developer, and he's not attempting to add additional density. He's not seeking to maximize square footage or add new stories. He inherited a partially completed project that was approved at one time and is now seeking lawfully just to finish the job. At the time he took title, he did not have zoning counsel. He did not understand section 7.4. He thought he was continuing to function under a valid permit, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So what we did then is we tried the historic route. So we thought, hey, look, maybe the structure qualifies as historic, so we, under section 29 of the ordinance, so we filed a historic commission request asking them to find that the building was a historically significant structure. If they had agreed, we would have then been able to file a special permit and move ahead. But in February of this year, they determined that the building did not meet the historic significance requirements, so that door closed too. And now we're here, and we're asking for your support on a zoning amendment that gives this and frankly similar properties in the city a chance at being put back into productive use. The amendment is simple and limited, and I want to just emphasize, I guess, 3 important things. So the first is that this allows single and 2-family homes that have lost their non-conforming status under section 7.4 to be reinstated, but, and I really want to emphasize this, only by special permit from the city council. And going off of that too, it makes clear that if any variances are needed, like lot size or setbacks or whatever that may be, you have to go to the Board of Appeals to get a variance. And then the last point is just, you know, this, and I guess this summarizes all of it, this keeps full discretion in the hands of the city. You know, this is not, we're not changing zoning, we're not creating, this doesn't create new uses. It just creates a pathway, one that doesn't currently exist, for someone to say, hey, I know that, you know, there's a building that's been unused for a very long time, but I want to see if the city will allow me to bring this back. But the discretion is still completely 100% in the hands of the city. Nothing changes on the actual zoning front or the use front. So, you know, I guess one question is, why doesn't the current language work? And let me just start with section 7.4, which is really at the heart of the issue. Section 7.4 says essentially that if a non-conforming use or structure hasn't been used for 2 years, it's gone. No exceptions, no discretion, no way to ask for relief. There's nothing you can do. So then, if you then take that and read it with section 7.3, that section allows an existing non-conforming use to be altered or extended as long as the city finds that it won't be more substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And that's fine for active uses that are still legally non-conforming. But once section 7.4 says that use is abandoned, section 7.3 no longer applies. So again, you're left with no recourse. So that's why we're here, that's why we're proposing this amendment, and to put it plainly, the current language says, you know, you can't even ask, and what we're asking for tonight is you to say, look, you can ask, but it's up for the city to decide, and they might shoot you down, but you can at least have a pathway to ask the city. First look, I mean, the property needs to be fixed up. I think everyone can empathize with that. This isn't a case where someone's trying to squeeze in extra density or push a bad fit into a neighborhood. You know, without this relief, this building's basically just sitting there half finished and is frankly urban blight. And that's not good for the homeowner, it's not good for the abutting property owners, it's not good for the city, in my opinion. Second, the client's just proposing a two-family, which is exactly what the city said was acceptable back in 2017 and what the city approved in 2020. That was the compromise then, and it's what we're sticking to now. We're not coming forward with greedy paws saying, you know, can we make it a three-family? We just want what has historically been suggested. We just want to finish the project, to be honest. And then third, this is not a unique situation across Woburn. There are buildings that were at one point legally used for housing, but have since gone vacant. And under the current rules, those properties can't be used again without full demolition and then major variances. So you have to do a demolition, get variances, and then build it back, even if you were just building it back to the same point where it's at, almost to the same point where it's at today, minus, you know, the renovations that you need to just make it habitable. So just closing thoughts. I mean, the property's been in limbo for almost a decade. The client has the skills and is committed to do the work, but we just need a legal path forward to make that happen. And what we're asking is just for the ability to ask, because right now there's no legal mechanism that allows us to come to you and even ask if we can get a special permit or a variance for the building as it exists. So in any event, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I have a question. So this, you would still need to get the special permit to do a two-family in this spot?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now, the building itself, it looks like it was an apartment building or something, or
Just a two-family, just a two-unit.
that's what it is now? No, what is it now? Is it two-family now?
So I believe it's a two-family now, and we're trying to I believe I believe it's a two-family, but please don't quote me on that.
Yeah, no, there's two entrances, but I don't know if you're familiar with the building, but it looks like almost like an apartment building with
Yeah, it was,
2 entrances with 25.
they've been trying to sell it for like 6 years.
There's
I've looked at
windows
it
everywhere.
like 4 times.
I just have a question. So with everything you said, and all due respect, I'm trying to follow this. Now, are you asking for this particular building with this new language that you're proposing for this section, that particular building would remain, or are you still going for the demolition of that building and a building of a new building?
No, so we're not going for the demolition of the building and a new building. Absolutely not. What we're doing is we're just finishing the work that's already been started on that current building. I think you have pictures that show that work that's been done to date, and it's basically just stopped. All we're asking to do is just to finish it, because it's basically this half-completed building that's just sitting there. That's where we're at. We're not asking for a demolition. That would defeat the purpose. So
Just to say, I don't think that's really in our jurisdiction anyway, to kind of, as far as what they're gonna do with it. I think we have to think more about, you know, my understanding of it is that they're looking for a pathway to go to the city council for whatever their plans are to the city council, and we have to advise if that's acceptable or not. I guess my only comment to the board might be, just considering some sort of time frame on this, because I'm just thinking this now opens the door for every two-family. It's been a two-family since, you know, maybe in the 1800s, it was a two-family. It's been a single-family since, and now they have the ability to go. It doesn't mean the city council will approve it, but it might just flood them. I mean, you know, just candidly, in this case, I think this is a reasonable use case, only because I'm familiar with this property and how many times it's been around the block. But
Through the chair.
Yes.
So it's your opinion that this particular building is salvageable to become an occupied structure? You're not kidding us, are you?
No, nothing to do with that. I think if they want to take a shot at it, it's
In
not
this
really
thing,
my.
I never got a chance, Mr. Chairman, I just want to state, I never got a chance to talk to the building inspector this week about this ordinance. I never got a chance to talk to Attorney Tarby. I just, you know, everything's been really busy, so I never had a chance to get their side of the story. I did, however, talk to a couple of local contractors that have been in the business for 50 years or more. And this structure, they've deemed, these two particular contractors deemed this is the most unsafe structure they've ever looked at. And that there does not have any future. There's no future for this building. It's so unsafe. To think of it as being a structure that can be rehabbed and brought back to life in occupancy is almost, for them, unimaginable. It's that bad. You know, so, I mean, I've recommended to the board, and I'm leaving it open to the board, you know, to make up their own minds on this, but I think the present language, in my own unbiased opinion, just based on the facts of the matter, I think the present language of the zoning ordinance should remain. It's been that way for years and years and years, and this is a convoluted way of manipulating the zoning ordinance to provide for the resurrection of abandoned uses that were abandoned because they're so dilapidated, so orphaned, so forgotten, that, you know, the state statutes don't allow for resurrections of the dead structures, that shouldn't, you know, they're just uninhabitable, they're unsafe. I mean, that's the way I look at it. I saw the inside of that building, I'm like, holy smokes. That's my opinion.
yeah, and so just respectfully, so we're not aware of any reports that have stated that it's unsafe. And the city did provide the permit only 4 years ago. So the building, at least at that time, the bones of it were safe. Now, obviously, we haven't done any work on it since then, but a mere 4 years ago, the bones of the building were deemed safe. And the city said that we could proceed with a renovation. And I think that that's the point, is that it, you know, in order to make it safe, we want to be able to do the renovation. The bones, the actual bones of the building are good. We just want the ability to finish the work that we started on it, to make it habitable, to make it safe. Obviously, you wouldn't put someone in it right now. I mean, that's, you know, it needs to be completed, it needs to be finished. But ultimately, again, what we're asking is, we're not even, you know, take this project aside for a minute. We're just asking for the ability to ask. And you can deny it at a later date. That's within your discretion. But what we're asking is just the avenue to ask so that you can review it, because there are a lot of these properties. And to your point, there are a lot of them that probably should be denied. There's others that really do need to be completed and otherwise are just creating an urban blight. And so I would just like to pose that to the board this evening. We do believe that this is one which is salvageable. We do believe that based on the work that we've done and our contractors have done, that the bones are still very good. Only a few years ago, the city said this is something that is good and salvageable. So I hear everyone's position on this, but that is our position.
Dave?
So what I'm hearing is you want us to change the rules because you have a bad business deal. This guy's got $350,000 sunk into this operation. And I have to say, John and I don't agree on a lot of things, but he's pretty right on about this building. Looks like it's gonna blow over in a good windstorm. I don't know where they put the $350,000, but you know, this guy took the building in lieu of, and I think he made a bad deal. And now he's trying to get us to change the rules so he can recover his money from this bad deal. But, you know, this board sits and makes decisions that impact the entire community. And, you know, I'm not seeing anything in this request that I think is beneficial to the community. It's, you know, but that's just my opinion.
Question for John.
Yeah, and I don't want to consolidate this, and everybody, please have your opinions ready or whatever, but the point of most importance with this request is that, you know, we're dealing with the entire city, and, you know, there are sore spots here and there, but usually properties such as this do come down. You know, not one man-made structure outside of the pyramids, you know, lasts forever, and it's questionable about the pyramids. You know, nothing lasts forever, but, you know, wooden structures do dilapidate if they're not maintained. This thing hasn't been maintained. No one knows when it was last occupied, whether it was 30, 50 years ago. It's been a blight to the neighborhood because it's never been handled properly. It should have been torn down, again, in my opinion, should have been torn down and built new from scratch. Now, what I'd like to say to the planning board, right, outside of my opinion, is that I didn't have a chance to talk to the building inspector this week leading up to this meeting. And I didn't have a chance to talk to Attorney Tarby, who's the lead attorney, and he's on vacation, so I hadn't had a chance to talk. What I did research from several meetings ago, that a planning board can send a neutral recommendation to the permit granting authority, or the superseding authority to us, which is the city council. So, you know, we don't have to send a favorable or an unfavorable. We can send a concerned recommendation if the board wanted to do that this evening. Or, you know, the options are we could continue this hearing until we hear from the building inspector, which would be a prudent suggestion, I think, made, if we wanted to do that. If we wanted to send it to the council, we could do that without a recommendation. Or if the board, a majority of the board this evening, wants to make a formal recommendation, we can do that too. There's three ways we can proceed with this in accordance with the statutes, so.
And if I may, just briefly, there's been discussion about tearing it down and starting over. So just on that front, the reason why that's not feasible is just due to the lot size. So it's 15,000 square feet, you know, and it's in an R2 district, so the lot doesn't meet the standard, doesn't meet the requirement. So if we tore it down and started fresh, we'd need a variance, which is a much steeper, less predictable process, and our proposal is to work within the footprint of the building as it already exists. I mean, if you got a variance, I mean, you could, maybe it would be for a bigger building. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep the density as it is, so.
Through the chair to John, what is the square footage requirement on R2?
R2, it
Yep.
would be, a new construction would be 15,000 square feet.
And he says he has 15,000 square feet?
No, so the R2 district requires 15,000 square feet. We don't meet that.
Oh, okay, what do you have?
I think we have something around 12. But I can supplement that with the exact square footage,
Well-
if it's not in the package already.
I would just say, you know, my last thing I'm gonna say is, I do think we should take this property aside, because I don't really think, like, you know, I just don't think it's for us to decide if this property can be rehabbed or not. That's really for the, you know, the building department and city council and whoever else is involved in that, but, like I said, I think my biggest concern with this is just the timeframe of how long the abandoned use is. I just think it leaves too much open.
So if the definition of the abandoned building is kind of ambiguous. There's no time frame. There's no nothing. It just, I mean, it does say if things aren't done, but my only thoughts on these is that, number one is that for the amount of years I've been on the planning board, and Dave's been on longer, and Kevin's been on a little bit longer, I think. I don't think this has ever come before us before, something like this. So this isn't like an issue. I don't think this is an issue within the city at all, because we've never had it come before us. No one, you know, whatever, maybe nobody abandons any buildings. Or if they do, it's what we're kind of looking at here of a place that we think may not be rebuildable, so nobody ever rebuilds it. Or they tear it down or put up new construction. That's probably what it is. They don't build from the same building. So, I know we have in the past, but I'm not a big fan of changing zoning laws just for a particular piece of land. Usually if it's a lot of land, I'm okay with it, but for a particular piece, I'm not really, so I myself would go along with dissenting.
I just want to emphasize that our present zoning ordinance, in accordance with state statute, has withstood the test of time. So no one's ever asked for this to be amended. And it has worked to the city's advantage eventually with all abandoned properties. You know, land is valuable in Woburn. Every square inch of it is valuable. Sooner or later, something will be done on this property to improve its blighted condition, because the market conditions demand it and the price of property demand it. It's just that I know there's been a lot of work to try to rehab this, but, I mean, there's a huge history involved with this. You know, neighbors been upset with it, and it's been a blighted condition. And the owners, the previous owners, and it's changed hands, what, 4 times, in not that many years. And it's like, tag, you're it, you know, and this is what we're left with, an option with the convoluted amount of work added to resurrecting stuff that really shouldn't be resurrected.
Yeah.
And if it was wording, I'm sure the state legislature would have come up with amending statutory language that we would have had to adopt by now, and they haven't. Maybe this is something they can work on. But I don't think we should bother as a community to start amending our zoning ordinance that's convoluting what's allowed by state statute, because all our zoning ordinance do is reflect what authority we have. State.
Absolutely, and I do understand that. I will just note the state legislature amends zoning all the time. 40A was just amended again.
I'm sure,
and-
but for the record, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sure if you bring it to their attention and it has to do with housing, they'll change it for you.
Right, and then the last point, just want to reiterate, is again, you know, even though the vessel that this is being presented is with this property, we're not really just talking about this property here. We're talking about an issue that is systemic here in Woburn, as far as there's a lot of abandoned properties. And I think that this would create an opportunity to at least come to the city. And this, again, the city has full discretion. There's no power being taken away from the city. In fact, if anything, it's giving the city more power to decide. It's giving you more autonomy over your own town, to be able to say, all right, this is not typically something, in fact, we're gonna make a general rule of not allowing these types of projects to proceed. But in this instance, this really is a blight. It's hurting the abutting property owners because they're frustrated with it. They are upset that it's changed hands so many times that it's still not built. You know, it's lowering their property values. Again, this is just the vessel that we're using to get it here, and I know that it's not a perfect vessel, but it's an opportunity to address a larger problem. Thank you.
Just a last thought. Over the last 21 years that I've been on this board, I have seen in the newspaper a number of times when the council took on the issue of abandoned properties and did a pretty damn good job with getting the persons to either fix it or drop it, knock it down. And you see it, it's in the Times from every once in a while, maybe once a year, every couple of years. So I think there is a mechanism in place, John, right? Isn't there a mechanism in place where the city deals with blighted properties now? They do it.
Yeah.
So I don't see the necessity for this.
You know what, again, if we, the board, if you guys want to send this to the council and they can work with them, I guess if that's what they want to do, they are the ultimate authority with zoning amendments. And maybe at that point in time, they can be convinced by the building inspector or commissioner to see it the way of the applicant. But, I mean, I just think that the present language has worked for so many years and no one's challenged it. And eventually abandoned properties do get developed in accordance with the ordinances. You know, nothing stays abandoned forever, but, you know, I just think this, you know, my opinion is a little bit much,
Okay.
for the board to
Do
consider.
we have a,
Motion to close the public hearing.
by Dave to close the public hearing, seconded by Kevin. All those in favor? 4-0, public hearing is closed. Do I have a motion on,
Motion to send an unfavorable recommendation to the
city council?
city council.
Motion by Dave to send an unfavorable recommendation on this particular zoning change to the city council, seconded by Kevin. All those in favor? 4-0 carries. Good luck with the council. All right, next up, public hearing, zoning amendment. Zoning amendment, section 9, floodway and floor plan district. This petition aims to replace section 9 in its entirety with a new section 9. Floodway and flood plan district. Sections 9.1, purpose, 9.2, definitions, 9.3, establishment of district, 9.4, designation of community flood plan administrator, 9.5, permit required, 9.6, procedures, 9.7, standard requirements and conditions and approval, 9.8, requirements to submit new technical data, 9.9, notification of water course alteration, 9.10, variances, 9.11, abrogation and greater restriction, 9.2, disclaimer of liability, 9.13, severability. Come on,
Yeah, I mean, to simplify all of that,
please.
FEMA has determined new floodplains, you know, throughout the country. So for Woburn, what all of this means is that we have a new section 9 floodway and floodplain district. And that's in accordance with the new data calculations put in place for Woburn terrain as it relates to floodplains and floodplain districts or floodways. So, it's a replacement of the existing 9 with this newly proposed, and I would recommend to the board, that the new section 9 be adopted, or I should say, forwarded to the city council with a favorable recommendation as written.
Motion to close the
Did you
public
have
hearing.
input on this, John?
No.
Motion to close.
Motion by David, close the public hearing.
Second.
Seconded by Rob. All those in favor? 4-0 carries. Okay. On the amendment itself.
Make a motion that we send it forward to the council.
A favorable
Yep, with a
recommendation.
Favorable recommendation. I mean, basically, all we're doing is FEMA's come in and said, you gotta update your plan, we're updating our plan. And it's nice to know that they're looking, especially with water issues as terrible as they are, so.
Okay, motion made by Dave to send a favorable recommendation to the city council.
Second.
Seconded by Rob. All those in favor? 4-0 carries. Okay. Planning Department updates.
I'd like to tell you that we are continuing, Karen and I are both working on outstanding sureties, and we've made substantial progress with that. We're just digging through a couple more files, but I think by our next meeting, we'll actually have a recommendation, at least on 3 outstanding subdivisions in their sureties. And these are old subdivisions that we still hold money for. I'll give you an example. Montville Avenue, Woods Hill, TJ Lee's subdivision. You'll probably recall, everybody here except for Rob, that this extension of that subdivision went on for months and years. And it all related to a street light not being installed at the end of the cul-de-sac. But everything else had been completed. So that's the only reason we're holding money. And I visited the site in preparation for this meeting, and there's no street light on the entire street. There's not one at the beginning, there's not one in the middle, and there's not one at the end. This delay of many years now is a result of that one street light not being installed at the end of the roadway. I've been here over a year now, and we haven't had any contact with anybody requesting or demanding that light be put on. So we're trying to get to the bottom of it and see if we can come up with a recommendation to this board to, put this particular subdivision to rest. Whether or not a light is actually warranted. Does anybody recall this particular issue?
Which,
This is Wood Hill extension at the bottom of Wood Hill off of Montville Avenue. So when you're going down the hill, it's on the left-hand side.
we had this same situation with that Pearl Street
Yep.
issue. And then they put up a light that you could get a suntan standing under, and they had to take it down. Then suddenly, nobody came. But the one they put up was obnoxious to the neighbors because it shone in people's windows, and we don't want that. But, so are you saying, John, in this case, that there's really no reason to hold them to that streetlight?
I would suggest that strongly. No, it hasn't been an issue. Nobody's brought it to any planning staff's attention for years. And it's the only thing that was holding this up from being closed out.
Is that the one before the light, the left that goes up, back
Yep,
up? Yeah,
yep.
I remember that, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that was being built
Yeah.
back in the late 80s, I think.
So, John, if that's a condition, does the board have to vote again to eliminate that condition since it voted to include that condition? Or can you unilaterally,
I'm bringing it to your attention. It can be handled administratively.
Okay, all right, I'm fine with that, believe me, it's, I'm not, I know you're not looking to increase your workload.
I think some of these things are so, they're sensible to handle that way. They're so old,
Oh, sure,
and the thing is, the city is already maintaining the road. The city's doing everything.
well, the city takes care of its business.
One of the, I gotta bring to your attention, so, in an update, one of the efforts the city is engaged in now is, going through the process of formally and finally accepting, right-of-ways. Streets that should have been accepted as public streets, many years ago, and there's many of them. So that work is now underway under the leadership of the new city engineer. And engineering personnel are gonna take up that task once and for all, hopefully. Because this is a task that started back in the 80s and never really went anywhere, 90s, in the 25 years of this century. So it's something that has to be accomplished because Chapter 90 monies are only issued in the amounts that we request based on the miles of publicly accepted right-of-ways. So, we could add to Chapter 90 monies substantially if we accomplish this task.
And the naming process, they all have, do they
all
have names?
They all have names.
Okay,
So we don't have to complicate it anymore than,
I know, because I was just thinking,
yeah.
because you know the issue with the veterans and believe me, I know there's a long list of veterans' names you can apply, but that process gets really hairy sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I just wanted to tell you that is an effort that's underway in a serious manner. Hopefully it's accomplished this time. It's one of those things that's so easily put on the back burner when you're dealing with everything that's an emergency.
The other two things on here is setting up the June meeting, is number one, whether we want to do it on the 10th or the 24th.
Yeah, those would be the choices. I'm not gonna be here for the 10th. That might be a
Oh, well, let's do it.
pleasure for you
Let's-
guys not
let's
to have
do
to
it
deal
then.
with. Yeah,
Yeah.
do the 10th, okay. I'm with you on that.
We'll do
I'm
it
gonna
then.
give you guys a break from me.
So do you get extra money on the 10th as the acting? Wow, that doesn't
You know
seem
what,
fair.
I'll send, Casey and Karen can both handle that meeting. I don't even know if Karen, do we have anything yet that's been,
No, because we
no
don't,
applications yet that we're dealing with?
we don't have anything as of right now.
Either,
Would that be for you?
either date is fine with me, the 10th or the 24th.
Makes
And
sense.
as much as I know, I can't believe well, this is being recorded, so but people are gonna hear it, I'd rather have John here.
Sure.
So I'd rather do the 24th with you here.
I really appreciate that.
No, I'm serious.
I do.
I would rather do the 24th with John.
Works for me.
Okay.
Kevin?
Yep.
That's fine, yeah.
All right, so we'll pencil it in for the 24th.
That was easy, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It probably makes more sense too, that way the summer schedule,
Yeah, plus, Karen said you got nothing going right now, so,
right.
but again, I'm serious, I would rather have you here. The next thing is on the procedural rules, which are still in the hand of the director's office, and since Claudia and Carolyn aren't here, there's probably nothing to discuss on that right at the moment. I know you guys
I can bring you up to speed.
still working on it,
Yeah,
but,
so I edited everything in accordance with the board's action, and there was one outstanding issue that the board wanted, serious outstanding issue, the board wanted me to go over with Mark Salvati.
yes.
And I talked with him about that today. He has to do a little bit more research. It has to do with the amount of time we want to allow or constrict input from the public. Just to report back, he really doesn't feel comfortable with that approach, because it doesn't happen all that often. Remember this discussion that we had amongst ourselves that, we're probably better off you know, continuing a hearing, if we do have a lot of people that want to speak, you know, if we just get so tired, we can't, you know, keep our eyes open, say around 1 o'clock in the morning.
You mean like the old days?
Usually good for about 10 now. But I could take a nap and stay awake till midnight if I have to. But, you know, just, if we have that situation and we do need to continue the hearing to listen to everybody that wants to say something, you know, we can continue the hearing to another date.
So, I mean, I have the luck to observe the Board of Department of Elementary and Secondary Education every month, and they have a 5-minute limit. And they do a open hour or a half hour, whatever it is, and people come in and they get 5 minutes, and they hit a bell, and when they have 30 seconds left, and they hit 2 bells, and that's it. Time is up, and the people are reasonable. I'm also on the electrical board, and what we do is we decide when we have a topic at the time, when we realize how big the crowd is gonna be, if we're gonna put a restriction on them or not. We don't have like a set rule that says, like, DESI does say 5 minutes. I don't know if it's written down or what it is, but they do that. But the electrical board, we do it on based on the situation we're in. But we still contain it to 2 or 3 minutes. And the hard thing is when you have 14 people and they all say exactly the same thing that the previous person said, but you can't say, no, we already heard that. You have to let them speak.
The interesting thing with, in how many years we've all been here, really, most of the time, everybody's pretty cordial, you know, in,
Well, we've had a few.
oh, yeah, years ago.
Yeah.
Really, but.
Not many,
A
not
lot
many.
of people mellow as they get older, you know.
I think the biggest one was, do you remember that parking lot that Leahy had?
Yep.
And that was the one where I saw the most, let's say, loud voices. You remember?
Yeah.
It was something, because they were
I
gonna,
remember very vividly.
yeah, yeah,
I was on the planning board at that
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. That really brought them out,
Oh, yeah.
and they were angry because it was about blasting, and it's all rock, and it was like, you think you're blowing up over here, but you're gonna break my fountain. So but there was only one person I remember that kinda got out of control, and later came back and apologized, but,
That's one meeting I would like to take back in my existence too. It wasn't pleasant.
no, it wasn't,
Turns out they really didn't have any issues over there when it was done.
I know.
Don't remember hearing anything.
Yeah, but it was never done.
No,
They built the parking lot.
they just used it as
There's nothing on top of that hill. is there?
no,
No, they were denied.
it's just a big rock.
Yeah.
They use the bottom though, don't they?
Yeah, the bottom was already done though. This was an expansion.
Right.
On top of the hill, and all the neighbors from, the nearest subdivision came in. Yeah, that was not a pleasant,
That's some Winchester people.
that was.
Right, well, that was the big thing. How you're putting all the Winchester parking in Woburn, and that really rankled them.
I think that was in 2013, 14 era.
I had hair, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, that was not pleasant.
So, we'll wait to hear from Mark on that part too, because I am curious as whether or not he thinks we'd ever run into, I would like to have it, but if he thinks we'd run into problems, then we won't.
The only other thing I did bring up to Claudia, I asked her, and she's on vacation this week, there are a number of appendices that are proposed to be added. And I asked Claudia, might it be a cleaner, easier read for everybody to understand without the attachments? Like 8 of them. Taking into consideration that, I'd say everybody has access to the internet in one way or the other, on your phone, laptop, desktop, and that, anybody that really gets into reading those procedures, to a point they really thoroughly reading them, they can easily reference the statutes and the local zoning ordinances that would comprise the addendums.
So you're saying you would put a link?
Yeah, well, they are referenced in the procedures themselves.
Right.
The statutes and the zoning ordinance sections, they're referenced. So we don't really need to attach them, because it turns a document that's that thin into something like that. And I just don't think it's necessary. I asked her if she could opine on that, and that would be another issue that would come up before the board, before we take final action on it. Sure. I'd rather have a thinner, cleaner document that says what needs to be said. Than much thicker that people are just gonna say, you know.
Okay, last thing is, we have, minutes from the April 8th meeting. I would accept those when they're stapled in the correct order.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a note of that if you don't want.
Just those two-sided copies, I was trying to save money.
Motion to accept.
Motion by Dave to accept the April 8th, 2025 minutes. Second by Rob. All those in favor? 4-0 carries. I will take the one final motion from somebody at 7:52.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Dave to adjourn the planning board meeting at 7:52. All those in favor? All those opposed? 4-0 carries. Thank you very much.
And to make sure that